Lockdown. Lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building. Lock the door and turn off all lights. Wait for the all clear from school officials or local authorities. Lockdown. Lockdown. That's not me talking. That's a recording. 3 years old. Playing on my phone screen in an empty classroom while snow presses itself flat against the windows outside and the fluorescent light above my head does that thing where it can't quite decide if it wants to stay on. I found the clip 2 weeks ago, down some rabbit hole at 2 in the morning. Local news. Grainy footage of police tape and parents running toward a school with their coats half on, phones pressed to their ears. The cheer-in at the bottom read, 3 students, 1 security guard killed in Hargrove High School lockdown. Investigation ongoing. The investigation, according to every follow-up article I could find, went nowhere. What they did confirm, all 4 of them were found in the East Wing. Furthest point from the main office. Furthest point from help. Room 114, specifically. I put my phone face down on the desk. Then I look up at the room around me. Room 114. East Wing. The fluorescent light still flickering. Outside, it is already dark the way December gets dark, not gradually, but all at once, like something pulling a shade. The snow against the glass looks almost alive, the way it shifts and presses and never quite settles. Lock the door and turn off all lights. Wait for the all clear from school officials or local authorities. Lockdown. Lockdown. Everyone else in this school has been gone for over an hour. There are 4 of us in detention, waiting for a substitute teacher who is already 6 minutes late, in the exact room where 3 students never made it home 3 years ago. I remember thinking, at least nothing worse can happen today. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things that afternoon, but the one that still keeps me up at night, the one I keep turning over and over like a stone with something living underneath it, is this. What I didn't know yet was that our substitute teacher was already dead. Let me back up. Hargrove High School is the kind of place that feels like it was designed to be forgotten. Flat roof, brown brick, the sort of institutional architecture that looks like whoever built it had given up on beauty entirely and was just trying to contain people efficiently. It sits on the edge of a town that peaked sometime in the early 90s and has been quietly declining ever since. 1 grocery store. 1 stoplight. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, which sounds warm until you've actually lived it. By 2:45 that Friday, the building had emptied out faster than I had ever seen it. Last day before break has a specific energy, lockers slamming, someone always screaming in the parking lot, the smell of rubber and cold air every time an exterior door swings open. Teachers who usually linger were gone by 3. The principal left at 3:15. I know because I watched his car pull out from the window in the hallway, and I remember thinking it must be nice to be the kind of person whose mistakes don't keep them after school. The janitor was already gone too. I found that out when Marcus tried the supply closet looking for something to do and found it locked with a note taped to it that said "See you January 6th" with a little smiley face that felt genuinely offensive under the circumstances. 1 administrator was supposedly still in the building. Ms. Heller, vice principal, office on the opposite end of the school from the East Wing. Might as well have been in another state. The 4 of us sat in room 114 and waited. I should tell you who we were. Marcus was the kind of person who entered every room like he was already winning an argument nobody else had started yet. Loud, certain, allergic to silence. The type who uses humor as a first language and only switches to something more honest when the humor stops working. He had gotten detention for telling Mr. Patterson, in front of the entire class, that his lesson plan read like it was written by someone who had never met a teenager. The terrible thing was that he wasn't wrong. Marcus was usually not wrong, which made him very difficult to be around and also, occasionally, the most useful person in a room. Priya sat 2 desks from the window with her laptop open and her earbuds in one ear, the universal signal for I am technically present but please leave me alone. She was meticulous in a way that made some people uncomfortable. She remembered details. Dates, names, inconsistencies. She'd gotten detention for something involving a school board document she wasn't supposed to have accessed, the specifics of which she declined to explain. That told me everything I needed to know about her. Danny was near the door. Danny was always near the door, in every class, in every context, positioned like someone who had spent years calculating the fastest exit from any given room. He didn't talk much. Not shy, exactly. More like someone who had decided long ago that most conversations weren't worth the energy. I had been in 2 classes with Danny since freshman year and could not have told you his last name. Most people couldn't. And then there was me. Observant, a little anxious, exactly brave enough to notice danger and not quite brave enough to do anything about it first. I'd gotten detention for being late 4 times in one semester, which felt like a deeply unfair reason to be spending the last Friday before winter break in the east wing of a building that most students quietly avoided without ever saying exactly why. Mr. Calloway arrived at 3:38. He was tall. Older, somewhere in that vague territory between 50 and 60 that some people inhabit for a decade. He wore a dress shirt under a dark jacket, and it took me a moment to register what kind of jacket it was. School issued. Security department. The kind with the Hargrove patch on the left shoulder. Not a teacher's jacket. A guard's. He set a folder on the desk at the front of the room and looked at each of us in turn before he said anything. Marcus. Priya. Danny. His eyes landed on me last. He said my name like he'd said it before. Good. We're all here. He picked up the folder, held it briefly, then set it back down without opening it. Priya's eyes tracked the folder. Then tracked him. Then went back to her screen, and I noticed her fingers had stopped moving on the keyboard. Facing the door. Not us. The door. The folder sat closed on the desk in front of an empty seat. His hands rested on his knees. His eyes stayed on the door. 30 seconds of silence. Then Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, with the full confidence of someone who had never once in his life kept a thought to himself. Why is a sub wearing a security jacket? I didn't have an answer. Nobody did. And somehow, in a room that was already too quiet and too far from everything else, that felt like the first wrong thing. It would not be the last. Calloway didn't do what substitutes usually do. Most subs walk in with the specific energy of someone who has already accepted defeat. They find the assignment sheet, they read it out loud slightly wrong, they tell you to keep the noise down, and then they spend the next hour on their own phone while pretending to supervise. It's a mutually understood performance. Everyone knows their role. Calloway didn't perform anything. He just sat there facing the door for a while, and then, without turning around, he started talking. Water fountain on the 2nd floor is still broken, he said, conversationally, like he was continuing something. Reported it in October. These things take time. Nobody responded. Marcus opened his mouth and then, unusually, closed it again. Trophy case used to be right outside this hallway. He said it the same way. Calm. Facing the door. They moved it after the incident. Thought it would help people feel better about the East Wing. In my experience, moving furniture doesn't change what happened in a room. I told myself he'd probably worked here before. Substitutes rotate. Some of them cover the same schools for years. That was a reasonable explanation. It fit. I held on to it. Then the lights flickered. Not a long flicker, half a second, maybe less. But enough that Marcus flinched visibly, enough that Priya pulled one earbud out, enough that Danny's eyes went to the ceiling. Calloway didn't move. Didn't look up. Didn't blink as far as I could tell. Like the flicker hadn't registered as something worth reacting to. Like he existed in a slightly different version of the room than the rest of us, one where the light behaved differently. I watched Priya watch him. Then I watched her look back at her laptop and start typing something that wasn't schoolwork. She kept her screen angled away from everyone. But I was sitting close enough to catch pieces of it. A search bar. A local news domain. A headline loading slowly over the school's barely functional Wi-Fi. She read whatever came up for a long time. Then she stopped reading. She didn't say anything. She just looked at the back of Callaway's head the way you look at something when you're trying to decide if it can hear you thinking. I almost asked her what she found. Then the shadow moved across the frosted glass panel of the hallway door. Slow. Too slow for someone walking past. The pace of something pausing. Something looking. Then it was gone. I don't think anyone else saw it except Danny. He didn't say anything either. He just moved his desk backward, quiet, deliberate, 2 inches toward the back wall. Callaway's voice came without any pause. Danny. Still facing the door. Still not turning around. Move your desk back, please. We stay close together in this room. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the one before it. Nobody had told him Danny moved. The intercom crackled at 3:51. That specific sound, that hollow, electric clearing of the throat that every school intercom makes before an announcement, it hits different when you're already sitting in the wrong room, on the wrong Friday, next to a man who knew something he shouldn't have known. We all went completely still. Then the voice came through. And immediately, something was wrong with it. Not the words. The words were the lockdown announcement, lockdown, this is an emergency alert, the same words I'd heard on my phone an hour ago. But the voice delivering them was human. Not the flat, automated recording the school used now. A real person, reading from something, their breath slightly audible between sentences. The audio had that particular degraded quality of something recorded a long time ago and played back through old equipment. This was not the current system. Callaway was on his feet before the announcement finished. He crossed to the door in 4 strides, long, certain, with the efficiency of someone who had done this before and was not wasting motion, turned the deadbolt, and pulled the shade down over the door's glass panel in one clean movement. Then he stood with his back to us, facing the locked door, and waited for the announcement to finish. When it ended, the intercom clicked off. The silence it left behind had weight. Marcus already had his phone out. He'd pulled up the news clip, the same one I'd been watching earlier. He pressed play without the audio, reading the captions, his eyes going back and forth between his screen and the now silent speaker on the wall. That was the same recording, he said. Not whispering. His voice had lost the performance in it. Word for word. That was from 3 years ago. Callaway turned around. Old systems glitch, he said. The wiring in this building hasn't been updated since they renovated the east wing. Maintenance probably tripped something when they were shutting down for the break. He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to sound considered, short enough not to invite follow-up questions. It's a maintenance error. Nothing to worry about. He said it so evenly, with such complete absence of alarm, that I felt my own panic dim slightly against my will. That's the thing about calm, it's contagious in both directions. It can be genuine reassurance or it can be a hand pressing gently on the back of your head, guiding you to look somewhere other than where you should be looking. Half the room leaned toward the first option. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No contact name. 4 words. Don't open the door. I stared at it. Before I could process it, Priya made a small sound, not quite a gasp, something more controlled than that. I looked over. Her phone was in her lap, screen tilted toward her. She showed me without saying anything. It was from a girl in our year. Kelsey. Who had been absent since Wednesday with a stomach bug. Who was, by all accounts, at home on the other side of town. Is there a man in a security jacket in your room? Marcus hadn't seen either message. He was still staring at his phone, replaying the clip. Then his screen lit up with a new notification and his face did something I had never seen it do before. It went quiet. He turned his phone over and placed it face down on the desk. Mine buzzed again. Unknown number. Different from the first. Don't let him know you got these. I turned my phone over. Calloway was already looking at us. Phones face down, please. His voice hadn't changed. Still measured. Still reasonable. Texts during a lockdown spread misinformation and cause panic. It's how rumors start. It's how people get hurt making decisions based on things that aren't true. He was not wrong. That was the most terrifying thing he had said yet. Because he wasn't wrong, and he was also standing between us and the only door out of the room, and somewhere in the East Wing hallway, on the other side of a shade we could no longer see through, something had been moving slowly past the glass. We put our phones down. We waited. The fluorescent light flickered once more and this time, it didn't quite come all the way back. The door handle turned at 4:07. I know the exact time because I was staring at my phone screen, face up for just a moment, checking the time the way you do when you're trying to convince yourself that normal things are still happening, when the movement caught my eye. Slow. Deliberate. The handle rotating downward in careful increments, the way someone moves when they want to know if a door will open without wanting the people inside to know they're checking. Calloway saw it the moment we did. He didn't move. Didn't stand. Didn't reach for anything. He just watched the handle with the focused, patient stillness of someone who had been expecting it. When the handle stopped, met the resistance of the deadbolt and went no further, he held his gaze on it for another 3 seconds. Then he sat back in his chair and picked up the book he'd placed on the desk beside him. He opened it to a page somewhere in the middle, like a man continuing something he'd been interrupted from. Marcus stood up. I'm calling 911. He already had his phone in his hand. Whatever this is, I'm done sitting here waiting to find out. Sit down, Marcus. Calloway didn't look up from the book. You don't get to tell me. Calling out on an active frequency during a lockdown tells anyone listening exactly where you are. Now he looked up. His eyes were steady in a way that had stopped feeling reassuring and started feeling like something else entirely, something without the right texture underneath it. Is that true? Yes. Is it possible nobody is listening? Also yes. That's a decision you're making for all 4 of you, not just yourself. Marcus stood there for another moment, phone in hand, and I watched him do the calculation. Then he sat down. Under the desk, Priya pressed her phone against my arm. The screen showed a local news article. The kind with a stock photo of the school at the top and a dateline from 3 years ago. She'd highlighted a paragraph with her thumb. Among the deceased was Raymond Calloway, 58, a security guard employed by the Hargrove District for 11 years. Calloway was found in the East Wing after reportedly responding to the initial alert alone. Colleagues describe him as dedicated and methodical. He is survived by a sister in Vermont. I read it twice. Then I looked up at the man sitting at the front of room 114. He was reading. Completely still. The fluorescent light directly above him had been flickering since the intercom went off, cycling in and out of full brightness in a slow, irregular pulse that the other lights in the room weren't matching. Like it was responding to something in that specific spot rather than a general fault in the wiring. I told myself, Calloway is a common name. There are probably a dozen Calloways in this county alone. The substitute system pulls from a district-wide pool. Half those people are former staff, retired teachers, people who've worked adjacent to schools for years. The security jacket could be standard issue for any sub covering a campus supervision role during after-hours detention. These were all reasonable things. I held them in both hands like they were something solid. Priya took her phone back. She kept searching. I watched her find something else. I watched her look at it for a long time, longer than the article, longer than the paragraph. Whatever it was, it loaded slowly and she leaned toward the screen while it did, like proximity would help. Then she stopped leaning. She looked at whatever was on that screen for 10 more seconds without moving. Then she passed the phone back to me. It was a photograph. Grainy, the way photos from local news archives always are, compressed and degraded, a body doing its best impression of itself in low resolution. A man in a security jacket standing near a trophy case in what I recognized as the main hallway of the school. The photo had been taken some years ago. My hand stopped working for a moment. I put the phone down. I did not look at him. The knock came from the hallway at 4:19. 3 times. Evenly spaced. Not frantic, not hesitant, the knock of someone who believed they had every right to be answered. Calloway closed his book. "Don't answer that," he said, with a quietness that reached every corner of the room. "Whatever happens. Whatever you hear. Do not answer that." There it was. The thing I kept snagging on, the question I couldn't resolve no matter which way I turned it. Whatever happens, that was protection. That was someone who knew what was coming and was trying to keep us away from it. But do not answer, that was also control. It was a man making sure a door stayed closed, and we had no way of knowing which side of it the real threat was on. Then Marcus stood up again. "Badge." His voice was flat. The performance was completely gone. "Right now." "Real name, real ID. Show me or I'm opening that door myself." Calloway looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes, not offense, not irritation. Something older than either of those things. He reached into his jacket. Slowly. Produced a badge in a worn leather holder and held it out. Marcus crossed the room, took it, and read it. I watched Marcus's face while he read it. I have thought about that face almost every day since. He read it once. Then he read it again, more slowly, like he was waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. Then he handed the badge back, walked to his desk, and sat down. He didn't say what it said. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the section. And somehow, watching Marcus go quiet was the most frightening thing that had happened in that room yet. Danny spoke for the first time in over an hour. "The lock is turning." Nobody questioned it. We all looked. He was right. The deadbolt, the one Calloway had turned with his own hand at 3:51, was rotating. Slowly. In the wrong direction. Not the handle this time. The lock mechanism itself, the part on the inside of the door, moving in careful increments like someone was working it from the other side with tools, or like it was being studied from a distance by something trying to understand how it functioned. Calloway was already standing. Back wall. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "All of you. Now." We moved. I don't remember deciding to move. I just remember being at the back wall with Priya on one side and Danny on the other, and Marcus arriving a half-second later, and all 4 of us pressing against the cinder block like we could disappear into it. Calloway positioned himself between us and the door. His arms were at his sides. His posture was not the posture of a man bracing for impact, it was something quieter than that, and somehow worse. It was the posture of someone who had already done what needed to be done and was now simply present. Waiting. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. Still calm. But underneath the calm was something I could not name then and can barely name now. Something that had been worn smooth by repetition. Like the calm of someone who has had to be calm about this specific thing many times before, across many years, until the effort of it had become part of their structure. "Whatever comes through that door," he said, "keep your eyes down. Don't look at its face. Don't respond to anything it says. Don't respond to any voice you recognize." The lock finished turning. The door opened. The hallway beyond it was completely dark. Every light out there was off, not flickering, not dimming, off, and the darkness had a density to it that didn't feel like the simple absence of light. It felt like something that had moved in and settled. The figure standing in the doorway was wearing a security jacket. Younger than Calloway. Much younger. A face that was almost right, arranged in the correct proportions, the features where features should be, but assembled with the confidence of something that had learned human faces from a distance and was satisfied with its approximation. It was smiling. The smile was the wrongest thing in a room full of wrong things. Too even. Too patient. The smile of something that had no particular investment in the outcome but found the situation interesting. Then it opened its mouth. "This is an emergency alert." The voice was the intercom. Word perfect. The same distorted human recording from 3 years ago, coming now from a face that was watching us. "Please follow lockdown procedures." Eyes down. Calloway's voice. Immediate. Right now. Eyes on the floor. I looked at the floor. In my peripheral vision I could see Priya's hands on her knees, white-knuckled, completely still. I could see Marcus's shoes. I could see Danny beside me not moving at all, like someone who had learned very young that stillness was the safest available option. The thing in the doorway tried other voices. A woman's voice first, warm, maternal, the specific frequency of a voice that means safety. "Honey, it's okay. Come on out." Then a man's voice I almost recognized as the principal before it slid slightly off true. Then something that sounded exactly like Priya's name being called in a voice that could have been her mother's. Priya made a sound in her throat and kept her eyes down. The thing could not seem to cross the threshold. It stood in the frame of the open door and tried every frequency it had, rotating through voices the way someone cycles through keys looking for the one that fits, and none of them worked, and I think I understood why. To work, they needed one of us to look up. To respond. To reach toward something familiar and invite it the rest of the way in. We didn't look up. I watched Calloway's shadow on the floor instead. The light in the hallway was off, but there was just enough of the flickering fluorescent behind us to cast shadows forward. Calloway's shadow did not move the way a standing person's shadow moves. It didn't have the small shifts of weight, the micro-adjustments of balance that shadows carry even when their source is trying to be still. It was absolutely motionless. Like a shadow with nothing alive at its source. Calloway spoke. Not to us. 2 sentences, directed at the doorway. Low, deliberate, in a register I felt more than heard. I have tried to write down exactly what he said many times. The closest I can get is that it sounded like the conclusion of an argument that had been running for 3 years, like something being finally, formally denied. The thing in the doorway stopped smiling. For the first time since it appeared, it was completely still. The voices stopped. The smile was gone. What replaced it was an expression I recognized despite everything, despite every wrong thing about that face. It looked, for just a moment, like something that had run out of options. Then the door swung closed. The lock turned back on its own. Clicked into place. The hallway lights came back on the other side of the shade. I could see the line of light under the door returning, and the room was silent except for the fluorescent above Calloway's head, still cycling in its slow, irregular pulse. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Calloway stood facing the closed door for another 30 seconds. Then he turned around, walked back to the desk, and sat down in the chair. He did not pick up the book again. He just sat there, looking at nothing, with the expression of someone who had finished something difficult and was now simply waiting for what came next. The 4 of us stayed at the back wall. And nobody, not Marcus, not Priya, not me, asked him what he'd said. Because I think we already knew that some answers come with a cost, and we had all decided, without discussing it, that we weren't ready to pay it yet. Nobody spoke for a full minute. I know because I counted. Not deliberately, my brain just needed something mechanical to do while the rest of it caught up with what had happened. 1,000. to 1000. All the way to 60, while the four of us stayed at the back wall and Calloway sat at the front of the room and the fluorescent light above him kept its slow, damaged rhythm. Then I heard myself ask it. What are you? Not who. I didn't say who. I think some part of me had already made that adjustment without permission. Calloway reached for his book. Picked it up. Held it for a moment with his thumb against the spine, like he was weighing something that had nothing to do with the book. Then he set it back down on the desk and folded his hands over it. He spoke to the middle distance. Not to any of us specifically. Like he was giving a report to a room that included us but wasn't limited to us. 3 years ago, this school went into lockdown, he said. The official record says it was a credible threat. An anonymous call. Standard protocol. He paused. That's not what happened. None of us moved. Something got into the building. Something that had been outside for a long time, working out how. It got in because a door was open that should have stayed closed. Someone heard a voice they recognized and didn't think twice about it. His jaw tightened slightly on that. Just slightly. 3 students died in this room because they looked directly at it before anyone understood what looking at it meant. The light above him pulsed once. I came into the East Wing alone to stop it. That was a mistaken method, if not intention. A pause that had something heavy in it. I didn't make it out. He said that last part the way you'd report a logistical failure. Factually. With the distance of someone who had finished grieving it so long ago that what remained was just the shape grief leaves behind. I've been here since. Something got into the building. Something that had been outside for a long time, working out how. It got in because a door was open that should have stayed closed. Someone heard a voice they recognized and didn't think twice about it. His jaw tightened slightly on that. Just slightly. 3 students died in this room because they looked directly at it before anyone understood what looking at it meant. The light above him pulsed once. I came into the East Wing alone to stop it. That was a mistaken method, if not intention. A pause that had something heavy in it. I didn't make it out. He said that last part the way you'd report a logistical failure. Factually. With the distance of someone who had finished grieving it so long ago that what remained was just the shape grief leaves behind. I've been here since. Every year. Around this time. His eyes moved to the door briefly, then back. It remembers where it fed. I looked around the room without meaning to. 4 desks in detention formation. 1 for Marcus. 1 for Priya. 1 for Danny, still closest to the door, who hadn't moved from the back wall and showed no signs of planning to. 1 for me. 4 students. 3 years ago, 3 students had sat in these same chairs in this same room and not gone home. I thought about every step that had led me here. 4 late arrivals in 1 semester. A detention slip I'd crumpled and then uncrumpled because ignoring it had consequences. The specific Friday, the specific room, the specific configuration of who ended up in which seat. I had spent the last hour terrified that we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that wasn't it at all. We were in exactly the right place. It had made sure of that. We were never random. We were never incidental. We had been chosen before we even knew there was anything doing the choosing. The intercom came back to life at 4:44. This time it was different. The voice was automated, flat, digital, the sound of a system rather than a person. The current system. The one the school had installed after the old equipment was supposedly decommissioned. The lockdown has been lifted. Students may proceed to exits in an orderly fashion. Have a safe winter break. It clicked off. Nobody moved. Calloway looked at us from the front of the room. Something in his expression had changed, not softened exactly, but shifted. The focused vigilance of the last hour had settled into something quieter. Something that looked, if I'm being precise about it, like relief. The specific relief of someone who has held a thing in place through effort alone and has finally been permitted to set it down. "You can go," he said. We looked at each other. Then at him. Then at the door. Marcus crossed the room first and opened it. The hallway was empty. Lights on, all of them, the full length of the east wing stretching out in both directions under normal fluorescent brightness, completely still, the floor reflecting the light the way it always did. Nothing there. No figure. No shadow operating independently of its source. Nothing at all except the bulletin board with the winter break announcement still pinned to it, slightly crooked, a piece of tinsel taped above it by whoever had decorated this hallway and gone home hours ago. We walked out. I looked back once from the doorway. Calloway was sitting at the desk. He had picked the book back up. He wasn't reading it, he was just holding it, facing the door as he had been when we arrived, as he would presumably continue to face it after we were gone. He didn't look up. I didn't say anything. I turned and followed the others down the hall. Outside, the snow was still falling. Steady and silent and indifferent, the way snow always is. The buses were long gone, the last one had left at 3:15 and nobody had thought to arrange otherwise. We stood on the front steps in the cold and called our parents one by one, the four of us, not speaking while we waited. The parking lot was empty. The school behind us was dark except for the east wing, where one light was still on. Room 114. We stood in the snow for 11 minutes before the first car arrived. It was Marcus's mom. She pulled up fast, the way parents do when they've been waiting for a call and trying not to imagine why it was taking so long. Marcus walked toward the car, then stopped. He turned back to us. "The badge," he said. We waited. "His name on the badge." Marcus said it carefully, like he'd been carrying it in his mouth for the last hour and was only now ready to put it down. "It wasn't Calloway." I asked what it was. "It was mine." He said it simply, without inflection, because there was no inflection available that would have made it make more sense. "My full name. Middle name and everything. Marcus Dion Hale." A pause. "I've never told anyone my middle name. Not here. Not anywhere at this school." Nobody said anything. His mom's car was idling. The heater inside fogging the window slightly. Marcus got in. The door closed. The car pulled away. The three of us stood in the snow and waited for our own rides and did not look at each other and did not speak. Here is what I have thought about every day since. It knew his name before it arrived. His full name, the one he kept private, the one that wasn't in any school record he was aware of. It had put that name on a badge carried by a dead man in a room full of students it had specifically arranged to be there. That's not opportunity. That's preparation. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't wander. It doesn't stumble onto places where it might feed and get lucky. It studies. It watches from whatever distance it watches from, and it learns the details, the names, the middle names, the specific pressure points of specific people, and it uses what it learns to construct the most precise possible version of what you want to believe. A voice you recognize. A face that's almost right. A name on a badge that tells you it already knows you far better than it should. And whatever Calloway said to it at the door, whatever 2 sentences from a dead man were enough to make it go still and retreat, that isn't a permanent solution. You can feel that in the way he sat back down afterward. The way he picked up the book he wasn't reading. The way he kept facing the door. He's been there 3 years. He'll keep being there. Because things like that don't stop. They regroup. They study what worked and what didn't. They adjust. Every time they're turned away, they come back having learned something new about how doors open, how locks work, how trust functions, how long it takes for someone's guard to fail. They come back knowing one more name.